This game between Bobby Fischer and Mikhail Tal is a classic. Played in the Candidates Tournament in 1959. This was actually the fourth game that they played against each other in the tournament, and Tal had won the first 3 games. Fischer was 16 years old, Tal was 22. Tal was on the road to the world title. He won this Candidates Tournament convincingly and went on to challenge Botvinnik in the final. I remember talking about Tal with the legendary Soviet player Yuri Averbach a few years ago, and Averbach said that at that time he felt that Tal could get away with anything. He just had an aura about him. He could sacrifice pieces, he could blunder pieces, he could take pawns and get away with it, and somehow he could just do anything. And we see that in this game. Tal played the Najdorf variation against Fischer, who was an expert in that opening, and Tal grabbed a pawn in the opening which was so audacious, and then, well, I don't want to spoil it for you because this game is such an adventure. And by the way, I have a very, very particular reason for looking at this game, which I'll tell you about right at the end. This is very special. Right, without further ado, let's have a look. So Fischer had white, Tal was playing black, and it's an open Sicilian. Generally, that's what Fischer always went for with white. And Fischer plays his favourite bishop c4. And this is a very aggressive move. Aggressive positionally, actually. You know, often you want to try and force this pawn forward again with f4, f5. And Fischer liked to conquer this d5 square. But it's a risky move because if white doesn't succeed in opening things up, then this bishop could simply be misplaced on b3 as it's sort of biting on rock there. b5 from Tal and f4, really sharp from Fischer, so not even castling. He's getting going with his attack. And here, well, it seems sensible to me to play bishop b7 and bring out a piece. Bishop b7 and knight d7. But Tal plays b4. This is outrageous. And after knight a4, he takes that pawn in the middle. So he's not developing any of his pieces. Look, he's just grabbing that pawn in the middle. I mean, is this brave or foolish? It's incredibly risky. And I might come back to this position at the end, actually, because Fischer says correct here is bishop b7, but the computers think otherwise. So I'll come to that later. Tal played g6, so that's basically trying to restrain this f-pawn. But Fischer pushes on anyway. Well, why not? You know, he's castled. Tal has no pieces in play apart from this knight. All these pieces look really dangerous, and black is already in massive trouble here. So, for example, if e takes f5, then you can play bishop d5, hit that rook. Rook here, forced. Knight takes pawn. And then queen d4. Now that's very unfortunate, with a simple double attack with the queen. After f5, g takes f5 from Tal. Knight takes f5. Once again, if pawn takes knight, then we have this double attack. It's very nasty. So Tal played rook g8. So he's looking perhaps for a counter-attack on g2. I mean, this is really bold stuff from both players. Bishop d5 from Fischer, a double attack. And if that's taken, then the queen comes into play. That's just really nasty. So rook a7. Bishop takes knight. So now Fischer is actually material ahead. Well, Tal balances things up. And now Fischer took on f5. He says in his annotations, by the way, this is annotated in my 60 memorable games. That's how you might know this game already. Fischer says it's probably better to avoid exchanges and play either bishop d5 or bishop f3. Fair enough, but I mean, this is pretty straightforward. You just have to look at black's pawns. Look, all these split pawns, and even these pawns are pretty ragged. And this looks like a very simple way of playing. And Tal played an extraordinary move here. I mean, he has no development. His king can't castle. What do you do? It looks absolutely appalling. Tal played rook e7. That's one way of defending your king. Extraordinary. Fischer exchanged. And he now played bishop f4, which looks very straightforward. Looks pretty good. But Fischer says that he should have played c3 to open things up. But anyway, bishop f4 looks very natural. But after queen c6, Tal is definitely back in the game. Mate is threatened, as well as the knight. Fischer plugged things with queen f3, and now Fischer was expecting Tal to just exchange queens. And this could be tenable. You know, black is no material down. Quite a few pawns have been exchanged off. And in this position, of course, white is better. Black's pawns aren't so great, but this could well be tenable. Or even rook e4 is interesting as well. I mean, the rook does a good job of shielding the king here, actually. But Fischer couldn't believe it when Tal grabbed that knight. I mean, that is extraordinary. Considering there's quite a safe way to play. You can go into an endgame where you're a little bit worse, but it's probably tenable. For Tal to take that knight is, well, I don't know, bold, courageous, audacious, daring, foolish, possibly all those things. After bishop takes pawn, it looks like black is lost in this position. If the rook drops, then the queen is going to break in. But Tal had prepared a defence. Queen c6. So Fischer took the knight. It's still possible to exchange queens here, actually. That's probably not too bad. But Tal was obviously intent on taking his extra piece. So a check. King goes in the corner, and then queen takes bishop. So Tal with black is a piece up here. Fischer has one pawn for it. But look at black's king stuck in the middle. Fischer gave a check on c6. In fact, if he'd played rook e1, Tal thought that he was probably lost here. In fact, as Fischer showed, king d8 is a saving move. I mean, that's a remarkable move in itself. Incredibly, it's not possible for white to win this position. So, for example, here you can give some checks. And, I mean, you've even got to be careful. If queen takes f7, then black can take over the initiative here. Incredibly. Everything is just about holding together in this position. The computer actually thinks that black is doing all right there. Incredible. In any case, Fischer played queen c6 check and rook e1. I mean, this looks so scary. The fact that Tal sort of voluntarily went in for this, I find amazing. And you've got to get it absolutely right. So, for example, here, you might think that king d8 looks correct. But in fact, white can play rook takes pawn. And this is winning. So bishop e7, rook takes pawn. If queen d7, then queen d6. Black is holding on there. So queen e6 check. Again, you've got to get this right. If king g7, then queen takes rook is winning because that bishop is hanging. So you've got to play king f8. And now queen takes rook. Queen d6. So Tal is just about finding his feet now. Queen b7 after a series of only moves here. And rook g6, that's a very important move because it allows the king to step up the board and the rook can actually come into play now. The queen and rook coordinate. Major pieces need to work together. And it's at this moment where Fischer realised, well, he has to be careful because his attack is fizzling out. So that's why he played c3 in a bid to exchange pawns. So the more pawns that he can exchange, the closer he gets to a draw. And there are various moments where Fischer says in his book, yeah, he could have done better, but the computer always thinks that black is better in these positions and has decent winning chances. But there's one moment a little later on which is quite clear. So Fischer exchanging pawns. And at this point, Fischer played g3, and that allowed a queen exchange. And in practical terms, that just made life much simpler for Tal. Instead, Fischer recommends queen e4, and you know, he basically says in this position, queen check, check, and back again. And Fischer thinks that white can hold this because it's too difficult for black to mount any kind of attack because there's no pawn cover for the king. And certainly black has enormous practical difficulties there in going forward. Computer still thinks that should be winning for black, but it's very difficult. But g3 definitely makes life a lot easier for Tal. So a queen exchange, and this is an important move. How do you protect that pawn? If you play bishop e7, then white can exchange off all those pawns, and the best that black can achieve in this position is rook and bishop against rook. And if b3, then that pawn can actually be taken. I mean, the rook can defend like this, but I think that a pawn is going to be troublesome. So rook b6 is a really important move because it means that if a3, then you can play b3 and the rook guards the b pawn and that bishop can come here to attack b2. So king g2. Let's see how Tal managed to squeeze this one out. King e3, bishop g5 check, and king d5. I mean, it's very nice for black that already the king has managed to come right into the middle of the board and gain ground. You know, is higher up the board than white. Bishop f6. So this is an important moment. Tal is attacking the pawn on b2. Fischer has to decide, how do you defend that? And Fischer says he should have played b3, but you know, I can understand why he didn't want to do that, because after bishop e7 guarding this pawn, then black never has to worry about the pawns being exchanged off. And obviously that's just winning a pawn. But Fischer still says that's the best to do, the best thing to do. But after this, so the rook is tied down, and little by little Fischer is ground down here. Grind like a grandmaster, as Magnus and David like to say. You can see that black is just crawling in here. You know, this and rook f2 are threatened. So that's why Fischer went for a3. But this is now losing. Need some delicate steps here, actually. check, and king c7, and here's the winning idea, bishop a1, and after a4, b2, that's the end of the story, because if king takes rook, then you get a queen with check. That's the trick, and there is no way out for white here. If you don't take the rook, well, that's a threat, and if the king comes here, you can play there, and a queen on the next turn. Just coming right back to, let me see, this position right at the start. So here is where Tal played g6. And Fischer says bishop b7 is a stronger move. But if you feed this into strong computers these days, just watch what it suggests. f5, okay, that's pretty logical, and knight e6. And white is winning according to the latest machines. Watch what happens. So that's a piece. And bishop e3, very gentle follow-up. I'll just go through the main line here. Rook takes knight. Beautiful move. Check. So now white is a whole rook down, and c3. So this is the computer way of playing the position. Rook a1, c1, and the king is just going to get chopped up at this side of the board. There's no coordination between black's pieces. So yeah, modern computers can tell us a lot about this kind of position. Now, coming back to what I mentioned earlier, why was I so keen to look at this game? Well, it's a beautiful game. It's a fantastic game. But also because this game was included in a beautiful film created by a student at the Royal College of Art here in London. His name is Umang Mankodian. He graduated from his course at the Royal College of Art in the summer, and I'm going to be showing his animation on this channel very shortly that features this game. Watch out for it. It's really special. It's a mesmerizing animation. It's beautiful. And there's wonderful music composed especially for the film by a student of composition at the Royal College of Music, Soban Afsarian, which is also really makes the film something very special. And I play a part in the film too, so watch out for it. It's coming on the channel soon.